domain one, which is the architectural concepts and the design requirements for cloud. Okay, so when you get into the CCSP mindset, please remember few important points. When you are discussing about cloud, okay, it always drills down from capex to opex as a migration, because when you go on cloud, there is no more capex investment required. It more goes on based on your usage and your build. So it is a transformation from a capex to opex. Okay, when you go on cloud customer is ultimately responsible for the security of its data. So you cannot say that, okay, my data is on AWS or my data is on Google Cloud. So those cloud providers are the one who have to take care of the security. You cannot say. Okay, even though through SLAs you can control these things, but ultimate responsibility lies with the customer. Okay, and that is where, when you are getting into a contract with any cloud provider, it is very important to add all detailed responsibilities, roles in your service level agreements to avoid any future problems on usage of cloud. Next important point is that when you go on cloud, encryption plays a very important role. Why? We will very soon come across. But then that is where customers should own the key management for the encryption, which is done on cloud. That's the next very important point, which everybody has to remember. When you are using encryption in cloud, it plays a vital role when you want to get rid of cloud. That means you want to delete your data. Then the crypto shading, which we will cover in a while in the further slides, it plays a very vital role. And the most important point is that security in cloud is not free. So even though you are migrating to cloud, yeah, it is safe, but then you do have to spend certain time and efforts to make sure that the cloud is secured for the end users. So let's understand certain further concepts on cloud. So on cloud computing definitions, if you follow the definition which is given by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, that is NIST, okay, it simply says it is a model for enabling a easily available, convenient, on-demand network to access a shared proof of configurable computing resources that can be rapidly provisioned and released with minimal management effort of service provider interaction. So what does it mean? It means that in cloud, okay, the services are easily available, configurable for a customer on its will. Now let's go into a brief history of cloud. Is anyone aware that how this idea of even Amazon cloud started? Because previously it was more of managed services or co-location environment. There is a history behind this, that when Amazon started its e-commerce website, and especially on these Big Friday sale or during their Christmas sales, they used to have huge demands from people, and to meet that, Amazon started adding the compute services for to meet the rising demands of the customers, so that they should not miss any sale. And their hardware went on to become so big that on non essential days, or say non-peak days, that hardware was unused, it was lying idle. And then came the idea of those people that when the use is less, they started sharing it as a resource pool, and that was the inception of cloud. Okay, so in nutshell, what is cloud? Cloud, for you, it is something which is a ready available service, but for the cloud provider, it is a typical data center what you and me have seen throughout our career. So it's a bunch of hardware sitting at a particular data center with the provision to provide the services to the end customer. That's the idea behind cloud. And when you get into these cloud computing, it comes with various roles. So what are these major roles? One is the cloud service customer. So who is cloud service customer? It can be any individual or any organization who want to host their application or services on cloud. So tomorrow you want to start your own startup company and you want to have a small application or a mobile app or any other service which you want to provide. You just go on the Amazon website and you create your company's account and you start pooling the resources. It's as simple as that. And that is where Amazon or Google, these providers become your cloud service provider and you become a cloud service customer. Is it clear? So the next term which I have already explained is cloud service provider. So these players which I have said, Google or Microsoft Azure or AWS, are the cloud service provider because they are having these pooled resources made available for the customer to select on their will. The next one is cloud service partner. Cloud service partner is normally an entity which is providing like a subset of services. So they are like brokers. They purchase the services from the main provider and they give it to the end users. So they mediate and they provide you the functionalities or the services in addition to maybe a few managed services. And that is the origin from where, that's a major difference between managed services and cloud service provider. That in managed services you are not owning the specific thing, but in cloud service the cloud provider owns the certain services which he is offering to the end users. The next is cloud computing characteristics. Now these are very important from an exam perspective because you will definitely get at least 2 to 3 questions on this particular area. Okay, what differentiates the cloud from any conventional or a traditional data center? So the major points which we were discussing is it's on demand self-service. So you don't have to have a specific knowledge or IT skills or a IT department to go and subscribe for these cloud services. You can simply go on any cloud provider site and you can just subscribe for these services and get going. To provide these services, it requires a broad network access. So what is that? It means that if you want to access services from Google or you want to access services from Microsoft Azure on each data center, they need to have the broad network, that is the internet access, where you as an end customer can connect and utilize these services. And this provides the criteria where you can be based anywhere in the world. So today, if you see for Microsoft or AWS or Google, their data centers are spread wide across world, and you can select your convenient zone and you can host your services there. So that is broad network access. One of the major criteria, which is also a security threat, is multi-tenancy. So what do you mean by multi-tenancy? Multi-tenancy is on cloud. There are multiple customers who host their data or services or applications, which creates a threat from a security standpoint. What does it mean? That means that today my company and say 100 or 1,000 other people are hosting their data on say Azure or AWS or Google, and our data is sitting on same data center on the same hardware, and it is shared from a resource perspective. So security becomes a very vital area to cover from multi-tenancy standpoint. Rapid elasticity and scalability, these are having very thin line. Scalability is that when you want to scale up or down on need basis your hardware. For example, you are an e-commerce company, and say from Indian perspective, say during Diwali you want to run a campaign and you need an additional resources only for 2 months. You can scale it up. The moment campaign is done, your load is down, you can scale it down. Rapid elasticity majorly covers when you are using the cloud services, say from your BCDR perspective, the business continuity and disaster recovery. So you are hosting it on a minimal level, and when you want to invoke your DR, you want it to scale on a rapid basis. You don't have time to, keep creating multiple machines at need basis. So that's where rapid elasticity plays very vital role. Resource pooling, now this is again a vital feature of cloud because it has got enormous pool of resources available to distribute. So it is having a huge storage, it is having huge compute base, firewalls, security devices, switches, all virtual devices pooled for your purpose. And last but very important thing is all these services are provided by all the cloud providers on a measured basis. So you pay for only those utilization factors for which you have used any service. So for example, you create a server on Amazon and you use it only for 3 days, and then you have shut it down for rest of the month. So you will end up paying only for 3 days. It is basically based on different criteria what you select. Okay. So what are the building block technologies for cloud? So any cloud, okay, needs virtualization of various technologies. So for example, on cloud hardware, there is a pool of hardware and it uses virtualization technology to provide the compute, to provide the storage to the end customer. For network, it is having a huge pool of network, which is having a front layer of software defined network, which gives you the capability to create your own IP ranges, to create your own routing. On databases, if you go on Azure, you go on AWS, you can have your own databases, right from Microsoft SQL to Oracle to Redshift to DynamoDB to MongoDB. There are lots of new technologies available to create your own databases, and all these services are scalable. And the last but most important part is the orchestration layer. This orchestration layer is the one which provides you all the important support to control your cloud operations. So when you say that I'm having the account on say Microsoft Azure or say AWS, so you have your own orchestration layer from where you can add a new server, you can create new database, you can add a storage, you can route your network to new countries, you can allow, disallow the things from your firewall. So this orchestration layer is your one-stop office shop for controlling the entire cloud. Okay, this takes me to the next point, which defines the cloud computing as a concept. So it is a service which is delivered using internet. And cloud describes the delivery of service applications using a pool of resource, which we have already discussed. So let's go on the cloud computing activities. Okay. So as I mentioned when we started on cloud, as of today, majority of people are considering cloud as an option to move from capex to opex. That's the easy way of managing the funds in a better way to get rid of vicious cycle of your hardware upgrade on a regular basis. These are few example. It depends upon a company to company. Okay, and it also, when you are selecting cloud as an option, it also reduces certain complexity from the IT perspective. So you know how your hardware will be hosted, how it will be secured, so your risk go down, your scalability and elasticity becomes very simple. So if you are on prem, you need to plan in advance that okay, I will need so many servers for this particular year, or I will need to add a storage. So those things become a little complex from the management perspective, which cloud helps you to get rid of. And that is where people are also getting into different modes of cloud usage. Another advantage of cloud from the architecture perspective is that it is based on your utilization. So your pricing is based on your utilization. So you don't have to keep paying the same amount if your utilization keeps going down. And it also gives you the agility to the business. So you have the rapid development and deployment possible. You have a reach across the world depending upon the nature of your business, and the collaboration and innovation becomes very simple with the use of cloud. Now that also gives you kind of a a strategic alignment from a broad oversight of idea integration into new business planning, because your speed to the market or speed to hosting any new services increases. Okay, now I will also say from an exam perspective, there is one very important thing is that extensive use of automation. It helps you to continuously improve the security monitoring, because you are reducing the manual intervention to the maximum. So the manual lapses or manual oversight is not possible, and your security posture improves. You can automate your security monitoring also. You can get certain automated alerts. So that is very important from an examination standpoint. Now when you go into architecture, there are few important categories which come into the picture from a cloud service perspective. And these broad categories are software as a service, infrastructure as a service, and platform as a service. Okay, now software as a service is, okay, I'll start with infrastructure as a service, because infrastructure as a service is the base. It is like, the way you have your existing data center, you have a privilege to design the similar thing in cloud. So you subscribe for an infrastructure as a service, and then you decide what kind of a server configuration you want on cloud, how many cores, how much RAM, how much storage, and you configure these things and you move your application base to a cloud. So you are just using infrastructure as a service. So the cloud provider gives you the infra and the related services hosted in their data center, but you are the one who is controlling everything. So responsibility lies on you. When it goes on platform, platform is, say for example, you want to host everything which is say on Oracle. So you go as platform as a service, where you don't have to manage anything on Oracle. You just migrate your application or a database base on a uniform platform and start using it. So your basic configuration is absolutely not required for that. And the top layer is software as a service. So any software, if you are using, for example, if you are using any HR software, say Workday, So Workday is a classic example where it's a ready-made HR suite, or nowadays Oracle Financials, which is Oracle Fusion, which is the software as a service. SAP HANA is software as a service, because the entire responsibility of hardware, software, database lies with the cloud service provider. So you just have to manage your users and you have to manage your data. That's the advantage of software as a service. So if you see from this particular slide, that when you are on prem, your entire responsibility, starting from networking, storage, servers, to virtualization layer, operating systems, everything lies with you as an end user. But when you move to infrastructure as a service, up to virtualization, that is the infrastructure layer, it is managed by the vendor, that is a cloud provider. And then whatever OS you want to install based on the virtualization layer, from there to your middleware, to your runtime environment, your data and your application lies with you. When you move to platform, you get everything ready. You just have to migrate your data and your applications. And on software as a service, everything except your users and data is managed by the cloud service provider. Okay, so these are the different categories of cloud services which are offered and which are available for all end users today. Okay, and it enables you from the capability perspective to give the cloud capability, where you can gauge what is the compatibility of your application, how soon you can move your application to the cloud, and how scalable your application is. It defines that, okay, what platform you are using, how this platform is easily migratable to any cloud service provider. Okay, and that introduces us to different, the cloud specific role, like, as we discussed, that cloud service provider, cloud auditor, the cloud customer, and all these roles are in detail, because there is not much mention about these roles in our study books. For that, we can refer the ISO IEC standard 17789, which has clearly defined the different roles which are specific to the cloud. Okay, so that takes us to the cloud computing activities, which is, the cloud deployment models. So when you have different services provided, like, someone is providing software as a service, or there is an infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, it also has different deployment models. And these different deployment models are like, a public cloud, hybrid cloud, community cloud, and private cloud. Now, what does it mean? Okay, so private cloud is something which is specifically designed for any individual organization. So it can be hosted in your personal data center, or it can be hosted on any cloud, but it is specifically designed. It is not shared, or it does not have a multi-tenancy. So it is private cloud. Community cloud is for a community, like, there are all, say, retail organizations which come together and form a cloud, or all healthcare sector, they come together and form a healthcare cloud, where, all healthcare related data is stored and shared within them. So that is called community cloud. Public cloud today is available, what is like, Amazon or Azure or Google. These are public cloud which can be subscribed and used by anyone. And hybrid cloud is when you mix and match. these clouds, like today majority of the companies are having their posture as hybrid cloud, because you cannot move all your applications at one go to cloud. So you are partially having your certain legacy applications on your on-premise data center, and you are having certain latest applications on the public cloud. So that is managed or that is recognized as hybrid cloud. And these are one of the trickiest cloud environments to manage, because your users are simultaneously connecting to both environments. They are connecting to your private environment or on-prem environment, and they are also connecting to the public cloud environment. So from a security standpoint, your responsibility or your scope increases. So another important thing in upcoming thing is impact of the related technologies on cloud. So if you guys see today, the Internet of Things or blockchain, artificial intelligence, these are the things which are gaining importance on a huge scale. Okay, and this is a very important aspect from even CCSP exam perspective, because when you are talking about these services, especially like IoT or machine learning, if you see a normal thing, say any smartwatch, like a Apple Watch or something, there is a huge data which is collected and processed, and this collection and processing of a data is not possible from a normal infrastructure. It requires a massive infrastructure to store and process the data on a real time. So the cloud plays a very vital role from these new emerging technologies related to Internet of Things or artificial intelligence or a machine learning, because it gives the scalable and elastic infrastructure available on the need basis. And this is introduced on CCSP exam, I think from 2018 or 2019, and there are definitely at least two questions, if I'm not mistaken, are asked on this particular point. So it is very important that we cover this from the knowledge perspective, that what are the considerations when the cloud technologies are used for IoT, blockchain, or artificial intelligence. Okay, then on cloud shared considerations, we have already discussed it partially. Like, very important thing when you are selecting any cloud provider, it is very important that you select a person where interoperability of the cloud is possible. So how you define it? Okay, so it is defined by how easy it is for you to move your applications from one provider to other provider. Now this, we are talking about your custom made applications. So previously, for answering one question, I have already said that if you have your own mobile app or your application and you have hosted it on Azure, now tomorrow maybe for your scalability or for your compatibility, you want to get out of Azure and you want to go to AWS, your application has to be capable. Now, another thing which comes through this is that if you start using any cloud specific service, for example, if you are using any cloud specific database or any cloud specific network functionality, then it will become very difficult for you to get out of the cloud. Okay, so that has to be taken care when you are selecting any cloud. The next aspect from a shared consideration is portability. So you should make sure that your application is portable, movable to any cloud provider on need basis. So it provides you from a vendor lock-in. So what is vendor lock-in? That you cannot move out of any vendor. That is a vendor lock-in. Another aspect to do this is vendor lockout. Now, what is vendor lockout? Vendor lockout is you say host your application to any public cloud provider, and that cloud provider closes his application and you are stuck now. You are not able to get your application or your data back. That is vendor lockout. Okay, so then you also need to consider from availability, security, privacy perspective. Resiliency is also very important consideration which should be evaluated while selecting a cloud provider. So what is resiliency? Resiliency is that you make sure that any cloud provider what you are selecting has a capability to function without any disruption to your availability in case of any disaster in their data center. So if you see when you subscribe for any AWS or Google Cloud or Azure, when you select your region, normally in that region at least two availability zones are there. That is to make sure that your data is already replicated between two zones, so anything happens in one availability zone, still there is no impact on your functionality on the cloud. So it's very important feature from an exam perspective. There is a definite question on resiliency. Then it's about performance, because if you are say in India and you are selecting a availability zone say in Ireland, then you might have a performance issue. So when you are selecting a cloud service provider, you need to make sure that from where you are connecting, the network stability hops are already identified, and as per that you are selecting a region to host your application. And last very important thing is from a governance standpoint. So if you are a company based out of India and you are storing a vital customer data, maybe from a Indian IT Act perspective, you are not allowed to store your data outside India. So, and these are specific rules which are applicable especially for a banking sector or e-commerce sector, where it's very important that as a cloud security professional you have to give your guidance on selecting or architecting the cloud from this perspective. It's a very important point from a governance standpoint. Then there are certain regulatory compliances which are mandated when you select any particular cloud provider. So for example, if you are having a credit card data stored, you are covered by PCI DSS. So this compliance from a cloud provider, if it is not there, then it's your responsibility as a end user. You cannot say that, okay, my data is stored there. But if the cloud provider is not PCI DSS compliant, then the responsibility lies on the customer. So you have to make sure that the cloud provider is compliant from these particular thing. In US, there are Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. So any health insurance data, it requires a specific compliance and it cannot be stored outside. So when you are selecting any cloud provider, you need to make sure that these all aspects are very well taken care in a due course. Okay, so now we get into the security concept for each kind of a cloud computing. When you go on any cloud, whether it is a public cloud or a community cloud, it is very important to have a encryption, because when we were discussing the characteristics of cloud, any cloud is which is having a multi-tenancy, the data security becomes very important factor. So you having the encryption becomes inevitable on cloud. And if you go and start configuring anything on Google Cloud or Amazon Cloud, when you are creating a database, it by default asks you what kind of encryption you want to do. and that's where the cryptographic management and the key management for encryption becomes very important. So if you are taking the services from, say, a cloud provider, and you are storing your encryption keys with the cloud provider, then your security posture is compromised. So key management should never be given to a cloud provider. You should manage the keys on your own. So customer manages key is the success factor for effective cryptography. Always remember that. Okay, and that also, as I mentioned during our starting of the session, that when you want to erase your data from the cloud provider, it becomes very important that you do a key management, because on cloud the cryptographic erase is the only safe way to remove your data. Okay, then it's very important for us to have effective access control for all the data or all the media what is stored on cloud, and that is where the digital rights management and in the information right management plays very important role, because from that perspective you are safeguarding yourself from any data getting copied using the network. Then we come to the virtualization security. Now on virtualization, please know that when you are using virtualization, whether it is on premise or it is on cloud, virtualization is created using a physical hardware. So normally it is the physical server or a physical infrastructure on which there is the host layer of operating system, and then there is a hypervisor layer which help you to create multiple guest operating systems. So that is where the virtualization layer is created. Now why it is important? Because if you are doing the virtualization, there are two types of virtualization. Okay, in type 1 of virtualization, you are running your virtualization layer directly on the hardware, which is called a bare metal virtualization. Okay, which is used widely for all kind of a standard virtualization. So you have a physical server, and on that the virtual layer like VMware, ESX, or any other hypervisor sits, and on that you install your various operating system, whether it is Linux or Windows Server or Ubuntu, whatever you are using. Okay, and the second type of hypervisor is where you are having your physical server, then you are installing the operating system on it, and on that operating system you are installing the virtual layer, and then you are installing the virtual servers. Now these type 2 kind of a hypervisors are prone to attacks more than type 1. Type 1 is kind of a safe hypervisor from a virtual standpoint, and this is a very important point to note, because on a type 1 and type 2 there is a definite exam question, and it is a tricky question. So sometimes they might ask which is the safest hypervisor to use, and it is in the options you can get type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, and you have to select the right option. And other thing can be which is not a safest one. But definitely on a virtualization security and a type of hypervisor, there is 100% one question in the exam. With the modern technology, containerization is very emerging and widely used. So there are so many containerization technologies, like there is a Kubernetes, there are Dockers, there is Lambda functions from AWS. So with that, your security responsibility also keeps growing. And that is where when any cloud architecture is designed in a particular way, the container security has also to be considered. If you are not considering, it leads to certain threats. So we come on very common threats which are on cloud. So there is one common thing which is on data breaches. So whether you are on-prem or on cloud, the data breach is a high possibility. So cloud computing has widened and actually the scope of data breaches, because with cloud computing, bring your own devices also come into the picture, because you are using your mobile devices for the apps, you are using laptops, so it is more breach prone. And that is where you need and if you are governed by various regulations, you also need to report these kind of a breaches to the governing bodies. So it's very important. Okay, then data loss you can definitely, when you are providing any information or download kind of a services, the data loss is quite common, and DRM is the best solution to prevent any data loss, so that you have your watermarks, or you have any solutions to prevent unauthorized downloads or unauthorized copying of the data. Okay, then there are normally on cloud also there is denial of service, there are malicious insiders, so there are various levels of threats which are also possible, and you need to take care of all these things when you are selecting and configuring the cloud. Okay, and as I mentioned at the beginning when we were discussing cryptography, data and media sanitization. So if you are on premise, sanitizing your media tapes, say backup tapes, is very simple. You can degauss them and you can destroy your data. If you are having a physical hard disk, you can destroy the physical hard disk. But in cloud, it is very difficult, because you do not have any control on the physical devices where the data is stored. So what's the way? The easiest way for data sanitization which is used on cloud is cryptographic erase, which is also called crypto shredding. So what you do in cryptographic erase is that you encrypt your data with a particular encryption key, and then you destruct your encryption key. So when the key itself is not available, nobody can retrieve your data. So it is as good as you are destructed your data. That's the safest way. And even on a cryptographic erase, there is a definite question in the exam. It's a very important from a cloud standpoint. Then when we go on each kind of a service functionality, so on an infrastructure as a service, your security posture is different, because end customer is responsible for the OS and all the functionalities. So the security responsibilities majorly lies with the end customer when we discuss about infrastructure as a service. When you go on platform as a service, it mainly goes again to the cloud provider. So from if I go back, so if you refer this, so where you are controlling the OS on a infrastructure as a service, you are responsible for the security. But in a platform as a service and a software as a service, from a security of the environment perspective, it majorly lies with the cloud provider. Okay. So this brings us to the next concept, which is the secure cloud computing principles when you design it. So please remember that when you are designing cloud, there is a data life cycle, and this again we are going to discuss in further two domains also. But please remember, it's a very important concept from an exam perspective. There are definite questions on this. Okay, so in data lifecycle on cloud, it's the short form is CSUSAD. Okay, so it is create, store, use, share, archive, destroy. And you have to remember this in this sequence itself, because in exam sometimes the question comes, what comes after store phase, or say what comes before archive phase, or they might ask what happens in destroy phase. So it's very, very important that you know all these phases what happens. So it's, you know, like on cloud, you create data, simultaneously it gets stored, then it is used, it is shared. So each stage we will discuss in detail in the upcoming domains. Okay, then we get into the most important thing on your architecture, that when you are getting into a business continuity and disaster recovery. So in the beginning we discussed that as of today many people are having their data centers still on premise, but they are using the cloud as their DR. So what happens is you have your primary data center sitting on your prem, and if something goes wrong, you have your recovery site on cloud. So sometimes when you are on cloud, and this also we discussed, there is another concept is that you, if you are hosted on AWS and you are hosted say in India region, then you can have your secondary site or a DR site in a different region, so that if something happens to Mumbai region, say your disaster recovery site is Ireland region, but these services on cloud are paid services. So if your primary is in cloud and you want also a DR, it's a paid service. Then the other option also what we discussed is that you have your primary application hosted on AWS cloud and you use Azure or a Google cloud as your DR. That is also possible. Okay, how do you select your cloud provider? So there has to be a cost benefit analysis from a security and other requirements. You know, like, you know, if you are having a particular application, how much it will cost to have it on premise, vis-a-vis how much it will cost to host it on the cloud. And you also need to look into, is your software portable? If you host it on AWS, is interoperability on any other provider possible? How can you avoid the vendor lock-in kind of a scenarios? This has to be evaluated. If any of you are already a CISSP, then there are certain concepts on, you know, a common criteria which helps you evaluate on the security posture or the standards of the cloud provider, which has the 7 criteria defined. If you are not, then when if you are just a CCSP aspirant, I will suggest that you should refer CISSP material to go through this, because it's very important that you should know that how this common criteria evaluation thing happens. Okay, and also when we are evaluating a cloud provider, there are certain certifications which should be evaluated. Like from a security, information security management perspective, we should see that the cloud provider is certified with ISO 27001. It is also certified with ISO 27017 for guidelines on cloud services by implementation of controls. It is very important that these certifications are available. Also, you can ask for the SOC reports, which is system and organization control reports, mainly, you know, type 2 reports which are specific to the information technology. So you get type 1 and type 2 report in that, where, you know, the type 1 report is on a particular time, and type 2 report is for last 6 months. So these also normally these are not easily shared. That has to go through a proper interaction with the cloud provider. But this is something which is recommended, that we should have a look at it. For this also, if you are already not the CISSP certified, I will recommend that you go through the CISSP material to understand these certification requirements in detail. especially for the SOC and common criteria. Okay, then also PCI DSS is another important thing which we have already discussed, because PCI DSS there are definite questions in exam, because like there was a question when I specifically attempted that what are the different levels on merchant levels where the PCI DSS certificate is given. And there are four levels, like if you are having 6 million and above, and it is on transaction level, it is not on the value. So the level one is if you are 6 million and above transactions. Level two is between 1 to 6 million. Level three is between 20,000 to 1 million transactions, and level four is less than 20,000 transactions. So this is very important from an examination standpoint, that that what are these criterias of evaluation. Okay. And another important thing apart from this is the FIPS, the Federal Information Processing Standard, which is issued by the NIST. And this standard, especially FIPS 142, is talking about the cryptographic solutions. So it is very important from examination perspective. And another important standard which is not covered in CCSP book, but it is again covered in CISSP, is FISMA, which is Federal Information Security Management Act. That is again important from the federal government perspective from US side. So these are a few important things which should be considered when you are evaluating a cloud service provider. I think I have covered these on the broad level. See, this is a express session, so I've tried to touch base majority of the points. So let us have a few questions on domain one. These are just sample questions to give you a kind of a feel that how the questions are asked. Okay, so first question is, which of the following tasks is in charge of developing cloud components as well as service testing and validation? And these are your options. The correct answer is developer of cloud services. Next question is, which of the following terms describe the cloud customer who pays only for the resources and services they use in cloud environment and only for the time they use them? So correct answer for this question is B, the service that is measured. Now, see, this is kind of a typical scenario which you will face in exam, where there are some terms which are just mixed with similar kind of a terminologies, and you are confused. So there is, when you go through the principles in domain one, it is the characteristics of cloud. It is said that the service should be measured. There is nothing in this written that service is metered. It's measured. Metered, there is no term called metered in the characteristics of cloud. Also, when you are consuming a service, what you consume, but then how they will decide that what you have consumed. For your consumption, there has to be a measurement. So now metered and measured is not different, but from a exam perspective in the CCSP book, what is defined as characteristics is measured. So they don't meter it, they measure it, and that measurement on when you go on your cloud dashboard or the main console, you can see the measurement given on your each service, that okay, today what kind of consumption you have done for say your servers or your network, and what is your projected bill for those services. Okay, So the correct answer is measured. So let's go to next question. Next question is, now this is a typical scenario based question. So Alice is the CEO for a software company. She is considering migrating the operations from the current on-premise legacy environment into cloud. Which cloud service model should she most likely consider for her company's purpose? The correct answer for this question is A, platform as a service. Why platform as a service? Is because when you are having a legacy environment, okay, you have a particular operating system and particular version of that. So if you move to a platform as a service where all those components are taken care by the cloud provider, you don't have to invest your time and energy to maintain that. Now, in this, because in that again, the entire ownership comes back on your team on configuring and maintaining that environment. Then it basically you don't end up doing any particular addition or a benefit to your company. So if you go on platform on service, you are just owner of your application and database layer, and rest the below all layers are maintained by the cloud provider. So normally from a legacy environment, if something is shifted on cloud, basically people opt for a platform as a service unless there is a restriction on your operating system availability on cloud. Okay. So the next question. Alice is the CEO for a software company. She is considering migrating the operations from the current on-premise legacy environment into cloud. Which aspect of the cloud computing should she be most concerned about in terms of security issues? The answer is multi-tenancy. Multi-tenancy, as we discussed, is the biggest concern for any cloud selection, because in a multi-tenancy environment you are going to have a concern on your security of your data and application from the access control perspective. So multi-tenancy is the right answer. Again, it is a scenario based question. So Alice is the CEO of software company. She is considering migrating to the cloud operation, her operations from current on-premise legacy environment into cloud. In order to protect her company's intellectual property, Alice might want to consider implementing all these techniques except. So this is a typical question where you have to be careful that you have to eliminate the correct answer and select a wrong thing. Again, turnstile is the correct answer. Go through the next question and just type your answer. So B is the correct answer. Okay, and on this again in today's session also we will have a bit of a detailed discussion on this, because from data security perspective or a data storing perspective, you should not store a sensitive data which is not required for your transaction processing. So credit card CCV number is something which is not required for any transaction processing, and it should not be stored as per the government regulation or a standard regulation. Okay, let's go to the next question. So correct answer is A, number of transactions per year. If you remember, we had a discussion on this, and this is a very important topic, and definitely there is one question. Now what I have selected is pretty simple, but normally they also ask the different categories what I explained yesterday, that what comes under category 1, 2, 3. Let's go to the next question. Correct answer for this question is C. Next question. The correct answer here is B. See, on cloud, as we discussed, the most important point and most sensitive point when you migrate your operations to cloud is the security, the cloud security, and that is where you have to have more focus, and you end up spending more money in securing your environment on cloud, and that affects your financial benefits. So in the given options, that's the correct answer. Okay, let's move to next question. So the correct answer is indeed ISO 27001. This is the most important ISO framework which depicts the security management standards and processes to be followed by an organization from a cloud provider perspective.